Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm James, continuing on with my build of the Aeromite RC plane. So as I like to mention in the introduction to all my videos of this build series, I'm building this plane off of a set of plans, as you can see right there. And you can't get this plane in a kit. It's not available in a kit. So if you want to build it off a set of plans like I'm doing, you can check out my introduction video for this build series where I mention a few different ways on how you can obtain a plan set. In the last video, I finished up the wing. In this video, I'm going to be attaching the wing to the fuselage. So to get started, let's go ahead and take a look at the plans, and I want to point out a few of the details. So here is the profile of the wing and the fuselage on the plans. So at the leading edge, the wing is going to attach to that F4 former there using a dowel. The dowel will be permanently mounted in the wing, and then it's just going to plug into F4. And the last video I did on this, I actually showed how to construct the sort of mounting area for that dowel for the wing, so check that out if you're interested. Right now the dowel is not glued in permanently because I need to take it out for a couple of different steps I have to do, such as covering, and this step I have to be able to kind of get in there and make some adjustments, so I don't want it glued in at this point. In any case, the way we're going to do this is we're going to find the center line on F4 on that bulkhead there, and once we get the center line and get it marked, I will drill out the hole that will receive the dowel. So moving to the trailing edge, we see the profile there, and they have a screw kind of going through the trailing edge of the wing and into this sort of L-shaped bracket. And I don't know what that is. I don't know. They don't mention what that is. They don't call it out. I don't know if that's supposed to be wood or metal. Most likely it's supposed to be, I guess, wood, but it looks a little flimsy to me, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that a little bit. Instead of having that sort of L-shaped kind of bracket like that, I'm going to put just more of a solid sort of rectangular block in there, and I'm just going to extend, just basically make it deeper and use a little bit longer screw for that. So I'll be using a nylon, I guess, screw or bolt. I don't know what to call it, probably a bolt. It's a 1/4x20 thread nylon bolt, which will be going through the wing and into that sort of receiving area where the little mounting block will be. And then below that, we see that the plans note this sort of soft fairing or a fairing. There's a fairing in the back and a soft fairing in the front. I don't know if there's a difference, but in any case, basically it's a filler to sort of fill that gap between the wing and the fuselage. If you didn't have those in there, the bottom of the plane would probably look a little bit unfinished. So what's going to happen is I'm going to be constructing these fairings on the wing itself. So once I get the wing mounted in the right location, I can then go back and make the measurements and such to kind of build up those fairings. And then before we get started, I'm going to show you some of the little parts I'm going to be using. So this is the dowel that we have from our last step. Again, it just plugs into the wing like such, and you have to make an adjustment to it, but it's going to be something like this. So that's just my dowel. And then going back to the trailing edge, like I mentioned, so here is this nylon bolt. This is, again, it's a 1/4x20 thread, and I'm going to be threading that into a T-nut like this. And then I'm going to cut a block, like I mentioned just a few minutes ago. I'm going to cut a block kind of out of this, sort of like a rectangular block. It's probably not going to be that thick, so that this can go in here. You know, it's probably something like that. And then for the fairings, again, I haven't figured out exactly how I'm going to do it, but I am going to be using my templates that I use to make the wing. So I'm going to be using the template to actually cut the shape I need, and then I plan on kind of cutting that shape I need. And then if you look at the plan here real quick, pull this back up here. If I can put this on here like this, like so, and cut this piece out, then I can just slide it, kind of use it like that, kind of help me kind of get that shape correct. So again, I'm going to have to sort of monkey around with that a little bit, but that's my general idea right now. And then one thing I wanted to point out again is back here where the little block is going to be that I'm going to be mounting the wing using that nylon bolt. You can see there's like these two slots that have been cut into that former, and then there's a smaller slot there in the middle. That smaller slot down there is for the control rods. These two sort of vertical slots, those are there to accommodate some motion of the aileron control horns. That's what they say on the plans. So I guess the idea is that the aileron control horns are going to be in here and they may have to travel back a little bit further, so you need to have these little slots in there. So yeah, so the issue is, or the problem with that, is that for the mounting block for the wing, it can't really span across this area. You know, typically you'd have a block in here like this, and then you just kind of drill a hole in it and you're good to go, and it's pretty strong. Really, I can only mount it in this little center section here, and that's why I don't like that the way it is on the plans, because it doesn't seem like there's a lot to really bite into with a bolt. So I'm just gonna, like I mentioned, I'm just gonna put a block here to kind of use this whole area there to mount the block to, and hopefully that'll be good enough. Okay, let's go ahead and take a quick look at our wing. It's just going to be on here like so. And then you can kind of see here now why the fairing would be important in here. You know, it's not necessary, but it'll just make the wing look a lot nicer and make the whole bottom of the airplane look a lot more finished. So in any case, so what I'm going to do, as mentioned, I'm going to start with this front dowel, which I have here. And I'm going to measure the center line. I'm going to put a center line right here, and then I'm going to mark the location using the wing, and I'll drill that out. It should be pretty simple, and that will be the receiving hole for the dowel. First things first, we'll mark our center line on our former there, and I'm just going to be using my square, and I'm measuring, it's about 2 inches and 2 3/16 of an inch, which means I got to go about 1 3/32 or 1 3/32. Someone got on me about saying 3/32 in my last video, and this person was correct. It should be 3/32 or 1/32 when you're making a measurement. So in any case, thanks for that. Thanks for correcting me. So yeah, so this should be 3/32. I've always called it 3/32. I don't know why. 1, 2, right about there. Nice if my pen worked. There it goes. Boy, that's a crappy pen. Hold on. Then I'm going to go ahead and measure another one. Right about there. And I don't like that last pen I was using. It's too much ink's coming out of it. So I'm going to try this one. So again, right there. All right, let's go ahead and mark our line here. Somewhere right about there. Okay, there we go. I think we got that marked okay. And you know, I get a lot of comments. Not a lot. I get my share of comments of, you know, I make mistakes. I say things the wrong way here and there, or maybe I have the wrong terminology. So I get it. You know, I don't mind that. You know, I appreciate it. Thanks for letting me know when I say something stupid or do something stupid. Well, sorry folks, I had a little mishap with my video. I wasn't recording for some reason, but what I missed was that I just sort of like marked that little hole with my pencil because that ink was bleeding too much, so I just marked it again with the pencil, make a little bit finer mark. And then I drilled it out with just using a pin vise. I just drilled that hole out with an 1/8 inch, and now I'm going to go back and drill it out with my 3/16 inch drill. But yeah, I don't know what happened. I missed that by accident. So now I'll go ahead and I'm going to drill this out with my 3/16 inch drill bit. But the problem is that I don't have, even with my small sort of Black & Decker cordless drill here, it's still too big to get in there without it being on an angle. So I'm just going to go ahead and use this sort of angled chuck, this sort of adapter. And you know, I got this at Harbor Freight, I think, pretty inexpensive. This is pretty valuable. I use this a lot when I'm building. You know, you can get down inside fuselages and such and drill holes when you can't get in there with your normal size drill. So I recommend maybe picking one of these up if you think that would be something you could use as well. Okay, let's go ahead and give it a test run. Plug that in. Okay, very good. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and move on to this rear, the trailing edge mounting bolt. Now, as you can see here, I have the plane set up in the small stand here. And the way to do this is a couple different things we got to keep in mind. Is first of all, I'm going to just go ahead and measure from consistent points on both sides of the plane to make sure things are lined up correctly. So obviously I want the distance from the tip of the wing there to the tip of the elevator to be the same on this side. And I can also do that from the tip of the wing here to the sort of the tip of the tail section here. So I can make some measurements like that to get it where I think it needs to be. The thing you got to keep in mind is a couple of things you got to keep in mind. Is one of them is that this build is not perfect and things may not be lined up perfectly here and there. So even though I make measurements that I get lined up, I want them to be the same, but ultimately they need to, when I look down on the plane and look at it from a distance, when I eyeball it, everything needs to look straight. So even though, for example, maybe this is off by a little bit, you know, a 1/16 of an inch or an 1/8 of an inch or something like that, you know, I just want to make sure that it looks okay, because that's ultimately going to be the thing that I think determines basically the best alignment, is just make sure everything looks like it should. And then one thing I do want to note here is that I did mention it, I wrote it on an earlier video clip, but I messed up and I didn't record some of the video for when I drilled out the hole for the dowel up here and I did some markings and such. That happens once in a while. I pushed the wrong button on my camera, which is basically my iPhone, and sometimes I make a mistake or I delete things by accident. So apologize for that. I missed a little bit of that video. Okay, so now I'm just going to go ahead and check this, and again, I want to make sure that it looks good from all angles that I can. So for example, from here, I'm just going to give you an example because it's kind of hard to do this on the camera, but if I go from the tip to this tip right here, I'm about, let's put it right there at 1, I'm about 18, and looks like it's about, I'm moving around, sorry, it's about 18 or so right there. Then I can come over to this side and do the same thing, and I'm right about 18 on this one. So it's pretty close. I like that. And I'm trying to do it maybe from the center of the tip to the center of the tail. Hold on to that. And it says 23, about 23 and 1/8 or so right there. Again, you know, I realize I may be moving this. I'm just trying to demonstrate kind of how I'm doing it. I think I said 23 and 1/8 or something. And this one is pretty close. I realize I'm moving the wing, so you know, I get that, I understand, but that's just sort of the process there. So once I get this lined up to where I think it needs to be, I'll mark it here on the fuselage in a couple spots, probably just put a mark on the fuselage to match a mark on the wing, and that'll be my location, and then we'll come back and we can set this and drill this out, and also set that block on the inside and go forward with the mounting of that bolt. And then one thing that's helpful in this process is to put a weight down on the wing. As you can see, when I was doing it just in the previous clip, I was trying to measure and the wing was kind of moving. This actually helps it kind of stay down a little bit sturdy, kind of keeps it a little bit more solid. So you can do something like that to help you do that. All right, I think I have this lined up, at least for the measurements. So I'm going to pull off this one weight here that I was using, and I'm just going to mark. I'm going to go ahead and mark it on, you know, it doesn't really matter where I mark it as long as I mark it in the same location on the fuselage and the wing. I can come back to it. So I'm just going to go ahead and make one mark. And realize you can't see this. I'm going to go ahead and mark it here. And then I'm going to mark it on the fuselage, so I know where that spot is. And let's come back to it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to tape it on. Put some tape on here to hold it, because I'm going to go back now and I'm going to take it off of here, like I mentioned, and I'm going to go ahead and set it at a distance so I can eyeball it, see what it looks like. Okay. And here it is on my dirty garage floor, looking down at it. And my main concern really is just look at it. Don't look at the details, because, you know, honestly, if you look at the top, sort of the turtle deck area and places like that, there may be a little bit of things that are off here and there. But I want to look at the overall dimension, sort of the overall relationships between the wing, the fuselage, and the horizontal stabilizer. We want, obviously, those two things to be perpendicular, the stabilizer and the wing to the fuselage. And then we also want the wing and the stabilizer to be parallel with each other. And those are the main things to keep in mind. If there's a little tweak here or there in the fuselage and things aren't perfect, you know, it's just the way it's going to be. But to me, this looks pretty good. Okay, so after checking it and double checking it and eyeballing it, I took it outside, and I also made a measurement, which actually was kind of simple. I should have done it this way also, from here to here, and also on both sides. It looks like it's in pretty good alignment. So now I'm going to go ahead and carefully peel off my tape. I already marked the location before. I'll mark it again just to make it more permanent. And then one last thing I'll do, I want to mark the wing where the fuselage is, because I'm going to center, that's what I'll use to mark my center location on the wing itself. So I'm going to go ahead and take this up there like that. And I'll do the same on this side here. Okay, so now I'm just going to measure inward from those 2 points to find the center. And then, as with my other measurements up in the front, I'm happy to say that this is pretty close to that one. It's 2 3/16, which means cut that in half, it's going to be 1 3/32. All right, so that's going to be approximately where it is on the center, and then I need to measure up to figure out where it's going to go in. Measuring off the plans, the bolt is about, the center line for the bolt is about 5/16 in from this former, this bulkhead right here. So I will move my, this point doesn't matter if the wing moves because I have it all marked. Let's go ahead and get my scale on here. So that's kind of where I have it marked, is right there. I'm actually going to move it up just a tad because the wing is a little separated here from the bulkhead. So I'm just going to go ahead and move it up to probably about 3/8, so pretty much right where I had it. So I'm going to move it right here. X marks the spot. Now before I drill it, just want to make sure that the head of my nylon bolt will clear everything. You know, looks like it's got plenty of room here. Before I drill this out, I'm going to go ahead and size the block I need, and I'm going to mount it inside of the fuselage there, and then we'll come back and I'll do a pilot hole in the wing here. I'll check it, I'll mark it on the block, I'll pull the wing off, and we'll go ahead and drill a pilot hole through the block itself, and then we'll come up and we'll finish it with the final hole diameter. So the first thing I need to do is I need to mark basically the limits of the wing, or the location of where the wing will be. So I'll just mark it here on the bulkhead. Oops. Okay, there's our little mark to show the top of the wing is like right there. And now the block itself isn't going to be too big. And in fact, my scale here is probably about 1 inch wide or so. And so I just measure down to that first hole, and it looks like it's going to be about 1 inch square block in there. So my block is a little irregular shape because this is a piece of scrap. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and try to make sort of a nice straight sort of cube using my square here. That. And then the center line of the hole, as you remember, was about 3/8 inch from the back of the wing, or the trailing edge of the wing, which would be right about here on the block. So let me go ahead and mark that. So that's about the location of where the T-nut will be. And then I'm just going to go ahead and mark on the outside of that, give myself a little bit of room. It doesn't have to be perfect. Somewhere like right about here. And I'm just going to go ahead and lop that off. And then now for my final measurement, my final cut, this will be the sort of the length, or how tall it's going to be. Cut this little piece right here off now. Okay, so it's going to look something like this. Now, and this is going to be attached to that bulkhead. Now the thing is I realize you're probably looking at this and saying, oh, that's soft balsa. It's not a hardwood. But I think it's going to be okay because it's actually pretty thick, and I can't imagine being able to compress this very much with this nylon screw, or this nylon bolt I should say, and as much pressure as I need to attach that little wing on there. So it's not like this is a big plane and that, so I think this is going to work well. And I can also make it a little bit harder by soaking a little bit of CA on this. And then back to our plane, this is going to go in here something like that. Now I can always trim it if I need to. If this comes out a little bit too far, I can trim it back and such, but this is a good starting point. And I may have to do a little bit of trimming in order to get it to sort of match the wing, because obviously the wing goes down from here. So I'm going to put it right here, and I'll just trim it as I need. And because this bulkhead is pretty smooth and it's a harder wood, I'm going to just use my roto tool here, and I'm just going to poke a couple little holes in here just to give something a little bit more for the epoxy to sort of bite into. And let me see the back of this. This is, you know, pretty porous balsa. So I'll put a couple little dents in that also. That'll help just kind of help that bond between the two surfaces. And then to make this a little bit easier on me, I just stood this thing up on some rags so it's nice and sort of level, and I'll drop the block on there and won't have to worry about clamping it or anything like that. Now you notice I put a little bit of that epoxy on both sides of the surfaces here. I just did that because I know when I drill it, you know, being the softer balsa, I don't want to tear it up. So I'm going to drill it carefully. And then once I do get it drilled out, I'll put some CA in there and such and kind of get that thing to be nice and kind of harden that wood up a little bit. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and let this cure, and we'll come back to it and we'll drill our hole out. Okay, so the block has now cured and it's in there nicely. And then I realized, yeah, I put this little coating on top here of epoxy, but I'm actually going to be trimming that off anyhow because I need to trim off the block to have it meet kind of flush, be the same level as the sort of the saddle here. So before I do that, because I don't want to damage the wood as much as possible. I'll go ahead and put a little bit of tape on here just to help protect that wood a little bit. I'm just going to try to trim it with this little saw. If I do it with a knife or something else, but I'll do it this way. I like these cheap disposable blades you can get at your local hardware shop. You can do something like this and have a nice long flat blade to kind of do some trimming. Oops. There you go. See how close that was? I got the tape, but I didn't get any of the wood, so that's why I do that. Okay. I think this is looking pretty decent. And now back to our wing. Slide that in there. Goes. And then I'll check it to make sure that that little block is not getting in the way, and it looks like it's not, so I think we're good to go. And now I'll go ahead and line it up on the marks that I made. I'll check it one more time, measuring like I did before. We'll tape the wing down to secure it, and then we'll come drill our hole. All right, got it all lined up again, and now I'm going to go ahead and first set my hole location with my awl carefully. And this is just very soft balsa. One thing I realized working with this really thin balsa sheeting is that I have to be careful. I've cracked it here and there, and I've had to do some repairs along the way just by holding it too stiff. But yeah, this is going to be very easy to drill through. But I want to take my time, and I'm going to use a pilot bit. And we'll just get it set into that block, and then I'll drill it out with the larger diameters. There's really nothing to go through there. It's so thin. All right, let me go ahead and check it now. All right, there's our little pilot hole. I'll line my wing up again just by finding the hole there. Now I'll get my other larger bits. So this is a 1/4 inch diameter nylon bolt. So I'm just going to go ahead and work my bits up to meet that size. Again, it's soft wood. I just got to be careful. I'm going to probably try to do this mostly by hand. I may need to get my drill, my electric drill, just to do that block, because I don't think my pin vise is big enough to hold 1/4 inch. Well, I know it's not big enough to hold a 1/4 inch drill bit. Now I'm gently just going to drill it by hand with my 1/4 inch bit. Hopefully I won't tear this up too much. I'm just going to kind of work it through. And take a look at that block in there. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and now just drill this straight through with my electric drill. Carefully. And there we have it. Okay, now that I have this set, I'll pull it out. I'm going to have to unscrew it because it's kind of stuck in there. And then, like I said, I'm going to be putting this fairing on later. And so the bolt's going to be actually a little bit higher. It's going to be flush with this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the fairing on and then come back and drill it from the other side, and then the bolt will sit straight down on top of that, and then the head of the bolt will be nice and flush with the bottom of the wing, right? So that's the goal here. But for now, let's go ahead and pull this off of here. To be very careful, again, this wood is very thin. I'm used to working on that big Balsa USA Stingray. All the wood was super thick and strong, and I can just throw it around as I need it. But this thing, I'm going to be very careful. So pull this out of here now. And now what I want to do is I want to set the T-bolt or the T-nut down inside of this guy right here. Should be pretty easy because it's balsa. And then once I get that set, I'll go from the bottom, and I'm going to go ahead and, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and soak a little bit of CA on this and get it nice and kind of harden up that wood a little bit. And then I'm going to go ahead and trim some of this extra material off just to get it out of the way, because I don't need that much there. All right, so here's my T-nut, and then to draw it up into that block, I'm going to go ahead and just use this metal bolt, the same size, and to protect this from getting too scarred in the process, I'm just going to go ahead and get a piece of scrap like this. I'm going to drill it out, same size as the 1/4 inch. Like so. Put that guy in there. Should have enough room, I think. Now I just got to get this nut on the bottom of that block. Hopefully I have enough. Yeah, that's plenty. Okay. So this is going to be a little tricky. May have to get some tweezers for this. Every tool has a purpose. There it goes. Hopefully maybe you can see that in there. Kind of dark, but there it is. Pull this off of here now. Kind of hard to see in there, but there it is. Okay, so now I can go ahead and back this out now. This guy should fit. Yep, there it goes. Very nice. Let's get our wing. Okay, so there we are. It's installed, and I'm not going to tighten it down too much right now, like I mentioned, because I don't want to crack that trailing edge. I'm going to have to reinforce that area with a little bit of plywood, I think, and such, because it's just very thin. So, but in any case, I think it looks pretty good. And now I'm going to go ahead and pull this off, and then I'm just going to go ahead and shape that block a little bit to kind of clean it up a little bit in there. All right, so as you saw there, I soaked that little block in there with some CA and let that cure. And I came back now and I mounted my wing. And one thing that I did off camera is I did add this little piece of plywood there, that little thin piece of plywood to help support this trailing edge. That actually is on the plans, and I overlooked that, but there's a little piece that you put in there. And then one thing that you can do, kind of in hindsight, I look back on it and think one thing that would have been a good idea is perhaps just kind of construct a little wedge-shaped piece of balsa and insert it in here in the trailing edge, because this is hollow, and again, this is very thin balsa, and that would have been very helpful to help support this little mounting area back here. So in any case, I didn't do that, but if you are building this, you may want to do that. So check that out. And then one thing I did mention in the beginning of the video was that I was also going to be constructing the fairing across the bottom of the wing here. I decided that this video is getting long enough, and my last video was pretty long, so I'm going to hold off on that until my next video. But in any case, I think it came out okay. It's nice, and it's mounted nicely, and I think it's nice and strong. I think it's going to do the trick. So yeah, I think it's looking, you know, pretty good. It's actually starting to look like a plane now, right? Cool. Okay, so like always, thanks for watching my channel. I always appreciate it, and we will see you next time.